Millions of years before any human walked the earth, our planet was already a place of staggering violence and beauty. Across the ancient landscapes of Africa, towering volcanoes reshaped the land, while massive predators ruled the plains and forests. Saber-toothed cats stalked through tall grass. Giant crocodiles waited motionless in muddy rivers. Enormous birds, flightless and terrifying, chased down prey with powerful legs built for speed. The climate itself was unpredictable and dangerous, shifting between lush rainforests and dry, cracked savannas over the course of thousands of years, forcing every creature on the continent to adapt constantly or disappear forever. This was not a gentle world. It was a world ruled by claws, fangs, and raw survival instinct, where the slightest weakness meant death. Most animals living in this harsh environment had spent millions of years perfecting their bodies for this exact world. Sharp teeth, powerful muscles, deadly speed. Nothing about this landscape suggested that anything resembling humanity could ever survive here, let alone eventually dominate it. And yet, somewhere among the trees and grasslands of East Africa, something extraordinary was quietly beginning. A small population of primates, unremarkable in almost every way, was slowly changing. Their bodies were shifting, their behavior was shifting. Nothing about them looked dangerous or special. But evolution does not always favor the strongest creature. Sometimes it favors the one willing to adapt. A new branch of life was about to appear. Around 6 to 7 million years ago, somewhere in the forests and grasslands of East Africa, a remarkable transformation began. Early hominins, ancient ancestors of modern humans, started doing something almost no other primate had fully mastered. They began walking upright, balancing their entire body weight on 2 legs instead of 4. Scientists call this bipedalism, and at first glance it might seem like a strange evolutionary choice. Walking upright was slower than running on all 4s. It exposed vital organs. It seemed in many ways less safe than the alternative. But walking upright offered something far more valuable than raw speed: freedom. Freed from the work of constant locomotion, hominin hands became available for entirely new purposes. They could carry food across long distances back to family groups. They could carry infants while traveling. Most importantly, they could begin manipulating objects in ways no 4-legged animal ever could. Fossil evidence, including famous discoveries like the skeleton known as Lucy, found in Ethiopia and dated to roughly 3.2 million years ago, confirms that early hominins were walking upright long before their brains grew significantly larger. This timing matters enormously. Bipedalism came first. Everything else, tool use, complex behavior, eventually massive brain growth, followed afterward, built upon this single foundational change. Walking freed their hands, and in doing so, it quietly began reshaping their entire future. Despite this remarkable evolutionary breakthrough, early hominins remained desperately vulnerable within their dangerous environment. They were not yet the dominant predators of their world. Quite the opposite. Early human ancestors stood relatively small, physically weak compared to many surrounding animals, lacking sharp claws, powerful jaws, or any natural weapons capable of fighting off serious predators. Lions, hyenas, leopards, and other formidable hunters viewed early hominins as potential prey rather than rivals or threats. Survival depended almost entirely on group cooperation, careful awareness of surroundings, and an intimate understanding of the dangerous landscape they inhabited. Early hominins likely spent considerable time in trees, retreating to branches for safety during vulnerable nighttime hours when predators became significantly more active and dangerous. During daylight hours, they traveled in groups across the savannah, gathering fruits, nuts, roots, and other plant foods while remaining constantly alert for signs of danger. Scavenging opportunistically from predator kills likely provided occasional access to valuable meat, though this strategy carried serious risks if the original predator returned unexpectedly. Every single day represented a genuine struggle for survival, requiring constant vigilance, cooperation, and accumulated environmental knowledge passed between generations. This was not yet humanity in any recognizable sense. These were vulnerable creatures fighting daily battles against a world seemingly designed to kill them. Yet within this desperate struggle for survival, something remarkable was quietly developing. A simple stone, picked up and shaped with deliberate purpose, would soon become humanity's very first weapon. Around 2.6 million years ago, something happened that permanently separated human ancestors from every other creature that had ever lived. Early hominins began deliberately shaping stones into tools, creating simple but effective implements for cutting, scraping, and processing food. Archaeologists call these earliest tools Oldowan technology, named after the Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania, where many significant examples were first discovered. These tools were remarkably simple by later standards, often nothing more than sharp-edged stone flakes created by striking one rock against another with calculated precision. Yet their impact proved absolutely revolutionary. Suddenly, early humans could access food sources previously impossible to utilize effectively. Sharp stone flakes could cut through tough animal hide, allowing access to nutritious meat that would otherwise remain unreachable. Stone tools could crack open bones to access rich, calorie-dense marrow hidden inside. This dramatic increase in dietary quality and variety provided crucial nutritional advantages, potentially supporting the energy requirements necessary for future brain development. Toolmaking also required and reinforced cognitive abilities, demanding planning, hand-eye coordination, and the mental capacity to understand cause and effect relationships. Early hominins who created and used these tools gained significant survival advantages over those who did not, allowing them to access resources unavailable to physically stronger but technologically simpler competitors. This represented something genuinely unprecedented in evolutionary history: intelligence and technology beginning to overcome raw physical limitations. Stone tools demonstrated that human ancestors could shape their environment rather than simply reacting to it. But another discovery, even more transformative, would soon completely change everything about how humans lived. Sometime around 1 million years ago, though scientists continued debating exact timing, early humans achieved mastery over something that would fundamentally transform their entire existence: fire. Learning to control fire represented an achievement of almost incalculable importance, providing benefits that extended far beyond simple warmth during cold nights. Fire offered crucial protection from dangerous nocturnal predators who generally avoided flames and the unfamiliar, threatening presence they represented. Cooking food using fire dramatically increased its nutritional value, breaking down tough plant fibers and making meat significantly easier to digest, effectively providing more usable calories from the same amount of food. This nutritional improvement likely played a crucial role supporting the substantial brain growth that characterized human evolution during subsequent periods. Fire also extended productive daylight hours, allowing toolmaking, social activities, and food preparation to continue safely after sunset descended across the landscape. Gathering around fires likely strengthened social bonds within communities, creating shared spaces for communication, storytelling, and cultural transmission between different generations. Evidence suggests early humans initially captured and maintained fires from natural sources, such as lightning strikes, before eventually developing reliable methods for creating fire independently whenever needed. This technological mastery over fire provided unprecedented control over previously uncontrollable environmental dangers, fundamentally shifting the relationship between early humans and their challenging surroundings. No longer entirely dependent on natural conditions, humans could now actively shape their immediate environment to better suit their specific survival needs. Armed with fire and stone tools, early humans were beginning to venture farther from their familiar territories than ever before possible. As millions of years passed, human evolution did not follow a single straight path toward modern humanity. Instead, multiple distinct human species emerged simultaneously across different regions, each adapting differently to their specific environmental challenges and circumstances. Homo habilis, sometimes called handyman due to associated tool use, emerged roughly 2.4 million years ago. Homo erectus appeared later, around 1.9 million years ago, representing a significant evolutionary advancement with larger brains, more sophisticated tools, and crucially, the ability to control fire effectively. Homo erectus also achieved something remarkable. This species became the first human ancestor to successfully migrate beyond Africa, eventually spreading throughout significant portions of Asia. Meanwhile, in Europe, ancestors would eventually evolve into Neanderthals, a distinct human species perfectly adapted to colder climates through specific physical characteristics, including stockier builds and larger nasal cavities for warming frigid air. Smaller human species also existed, including the remarkable Homo floresiensis, discovered on the Indonesian island of Flores, standing barely over 3 feet tall, demonstrating how isolated environments could produce dramatically different evolutionary outcomes. This period represents one of evolution's most fascinating phenomena: multiple human species coexisting simultaneously, each representing different evolutionary experiments responding to varying environmental pressures throughout different global regions. Eventually, however, most of these parallel human species would gradually disappear, unable to compete successfully or adapt quickly enough to dramatically changing environmental conditions throughout subsequent millennia. Only one particular species, emerging later in Africa, was destined to eventually leave Africa entirely and spread successfully throughout virtually the entire world. Around 70,000 years ago, though some evidence suggests earlier migrations occurred, Homo sapiens, anatomically modern humans, began the most ambitious journey in our species' entire history. Leaving the African continent that had been humanity's home for hundreds of thousands of years, these early modern humans ventured into completely unfamiliar territories, facing environmental challenges, climates, and landscapes utterly different from anything their ancestors had previously encountered. This migration was not a single, organized event, but rather a complex, gradual process spanning thousands of years, with different groups taking different routes, facing different challenges, and adapting to wildly different environments along their respective journeys. Some groups moved along coastal regions, exploiting marine resources while gradually expanding their territorial range. Others moved through interior regions, adapting to grasslands, forests, and eventually challenging mountain environments. This migration required tremendous adaptability, as humans encountered entirely new plants, animals, climates, and geographical features, requiring constant behavioral and technological adjustments. Evidence suggests these early human migrants successfully reached the Arabian Peninsula, eventually spreading throughout Asia, and remarkably, reaching as far as Australia by approximately 65,000 years ago, requiring sophisticated boat building and navigation skills previously unknown among human populations. This represented an extraordinary demonstration of human adaptability, intelligence, and determination as small groups of people successfully colonized environments ranging from tropical rainforests to challenging desert landscapes. Yet even as humans successfully expanded throughout new territories, dramatic global climate changes were approaching that would fundamentally transform conditions throughout the entire planet. The Ice Age was approaching, and it would test human adaptability more severely than ever before. Beginning around 115,000 years ago and intensifying significantly in subsequent millennia, massive ice sheets began expanding across substantial portions of the northern hemisphere, fundamentally transforming global climate patterns and reshaping landscapes throughout Europe, Asia, and North America. This period, known as the Ice Age, created environmental conditions radically different from anything modern humans had previously experienced during their relatively recent evolutionary history. Temperatures dropped dramatically throughout affected regions, while massive glaciers covered substantial portions of previously habitable territory. Sea levels fell significantly as enormous quantities of water became locked within expanding ice sheets, actually creating new land bridges connecting previously separated continents and enabling further human migration into previously inaccessible territories. Despite these challenging conditions, the Ice Age also created unique opportunities as expansive grasslands called mammoth steppes emerged across portions of Europe and Asia, supporting enormous populations of large herbivorous mammals, including woolly mammoths, giant deer, and woolly rhinoceros. These massive animals provided substantial food resources for human populations skilled enough to successfully hunt them, though such hunting required sophisticated cooperation, planning, and increasingly specialized tools and techniques. Humans adapted remarkably well to these harsh Ice Age conditions, developing sophisticated clothing using animal hides, constructing shelters using mammoth bones and hides, and developing increasingly specialized hunting strategies suited to large, dangerous prey animals. This period demonstrated humanity's extraordinary capacity for adaptation, as populations successfully survived and even thrived throughout dramatically challenging environmental conditions that would have proven fatal to less adaptable species. Yet even amid this challenging frozen world, humans were about to encounter something entirely unexpected: another intelligent human species. As Homo sapiens expanded throughout Europe and parts of Asia during the Ice Age, they encountered Neanderthals, a distinct human species that had already successfully inhabited these challenging cold environments for hundreds of thousands of years. This encounter represented something unprecedented in recent human evolutionary history: two different, intelligent human species meeting and interacting within shared territories. Neanderthals were remarkably well adapted to cold climates, possessing robust, muscular builds, larger brains than modern humans in some respects, and sophisticated tool-making traditions developed independently over countless generations. Far from being primitive or unintelligent, as historically misrepresented, Neanderthals demonstrated complex behaviors, including sophisticated tool use, controlled fire use, deliberate burial of their dead, and possibly even basic symbolic or artistic expression. The relationship between these two human species proved remarkably complex, involving periods of apparent competition for resources alongside evidence of direct interaction, including interbreeding that left genetic traces still detectable within modern human DNA today. Genetic evidence reveals that modern humans outside Africa carry small but significant percentages of Neanderthal DNA, definitively proving these encounters included intimate biological interactions alongside any competitive or cooperative relationships. Scientists continue debating exactly why Neanderthals eventually disappeared around 40,000 years ago, with various theories suggesting competition for resources, climate change, disease, or gradual absorption into expanding modern human populations through interbreeding. Whatever the precise combination of factors, this period represents humanity's last encounter with another intelligent human species sharing our planet. Eventually, after this remarkable period of coexistence, only one human species would remain to inherit the entire world. Following the disappearance of Neanderthals and other human relatives, Homo sapiens emerged as the sole surviving human species, successfully expanding throughout virtually every habitable region across the entire planet. This represents a remarkable evolutionary turning point, raising fundamental questions about exactly why modern humans succeeded where other intelligent human species ultimately failed to survive long-term. Scientists point to several crucial factors that likely contributed to modern human success. Homo sapiens demonstrated extraordinary behavioral flexibility, successfully adapting to environments ranging from frozen tundra to tropical rainforests to arid deserts, far exceeding the environmental range successfully exploited by other human species. Modern humans also developed increasingly sophisticated social structures, creating larger, more complex social networks, extending beyond immediate family groups, enabling more effective resource sharing, knowledge transmission, and mutual support during challenging circumstances. Perhaps most significantly, modern human brains began developing increasingly sophisticated cognitive capabilities, including enhanced capacity for abstract thinking, complex problem solving, and crucially, increasingly sophisticated communication abilities. This cognitive evolution enabled modern humans to develop progressively more complex tools, hunting strategies, and social arrangements compared to earlier human species or contemporary Neanderthal populations. Archaeological evidence reveals increasingly sophisticated technologies appearing throughout this period, including specialized hunting, weapons, sewing needles, enabling fitted clothing construction, and increasingly complex tools demonstrating advancing cognitive and technical capabilities. This period represents humanity crossing a crucial threshold as our species' minds were fundamentally changing, developing cognitive capabilities that would soon enable achievements far beyond simple physical survival. Something remarkable was happening within the human brain itself. Sometime between 100,000 and 50,000 years ago, human cognitive abilities underwent a remarkable transformation that scientists sometimes call the cognitive revolution, fundamentally changing how humans communicated, cooperated, and understood their world. Complex language, involving sophisticated grammar, abstract concepts, and the ability to discuss things beyond immediate physical reality, likely developed during this crucial period, though exact timing remains scientifically debated. This linguistic revolution proved absolutely transformative, enabling humans to share complex information, coordinate sophisticated group activities, and most remarkably, discuss abstract concepts including past events, future plans, and entirely imaginary scenarios that existed only within human imagination. Language allowed knowledge to be transmitted far more effectively between individuals and across generations, enabling cumulative cultural development as each generation could build upon accumulated wisdom rather than rediscovering everything independently. Complex language also facilitated more sophisticated social cooperation, allowing larger groups to coordinate complicated activities, share detailed information about resources or dangers, and develop more complex social rules and relationships. This communication revolution likely enabled increasingly sophisticated hunting strategies, requiring detailed planning and coordination between multiple individuals working toward shared objectives. Perhaps most significantly, language enabled humans to share ideas that existed beyond immediate physical reality, including religious or spiritual beliefs, storytelling traditions, and abstract problem-solving approaches applicable to entirely new situations. This represented a fundamental shift in how humans processed and transmitted information, moving beyond simple physical demonstration towards sophisticated verbal communication capable of conveying remarkably complex ideas. Soon, humans would discover they could preserve their thoughts and experiences using methods far more permanent than spoken words alone, leaving messages capable of surviving for future generations to eventually discover. Beginning around 40,000 years ago, and possibly earlier, humans began creating something entirely unprecedented: deliberate artistic expression, including elaborate paintings created deep within dark, difficult-to-access caves throughout Europe and elsewhere. These remarkable artistic creations, found in locations including Lascaux and Chauvet in France, depicted animals with sophisticated technique, including horses, bison, mammoths, and other Ice Age creatures rendered with surprising anatomical accuracy and artistic skill. Creating these paintings required tremendous dedication, as artists worked deep within cave systems, often requiring difficult, dangerous journeys through narrow passages while carrying torches or oil lamps, providing limited illumination. This raises fascinating questions about exactly why early humans invested such significant effort creating art in locations specifically chosen for their inaccessibility, rather than convenient, easily viewed locations. Scientists suggest various possibilities, including religious or spiritual purposes, hunting, magic intended to ensure successful future hunts, or perhaps elaborate coming-of-age rituals conducted within these dramatic underground settings. Beyond cave paintings, archaeological evidence reveals other artistic expressions during this period, including carved figurines, decorated tools, and personal ornaments crafted from shells, teeth, and bones. This artistic explosion represents something profound about human cognitive evolution: the emergence of symbolic thinking, allowing humans to represent abstract concepts and ideas through physical, visual mediums. This capability for symbolic representation likely connected closely with developing language abilities, both representing similar underlying cognitive capabilities for abstract thought and symbolic communication. As humans developed increasingly sophisticated culture, including art, language, and complex social structures, the natural world around them was simultaneously beginning a dramatic transformation that would soon reshape everything about how humans lived. Beginning around 20,000 years ago, and intensifying significantly over subsequent millennia, Earth's climate began a dramatic warming trend that would eventually end the Ice Age entirely, fundamentally transforming environmental conditions throughout the planet. Massive ice sheets that had covered substantial portions of Europe, Asia, and North America gradually began retreating, releasing enormous quantities of water that had previously been locked within glacial ice for thousands of years. This warming trend created profound environmental consequences throughout affected regions. The expansive mammoth steppes that had supported massive herds of large herbivorous mammals throughout the Ice Age gradually transformed into different ecosystems, including dense forests and different grassland configurations less suitable for the massive grazing animals humans had depended upon for crucial food resources. Woolly mammoths, along with numerous other large Ice Age mammals, including giant deer and woolly rhinoceros, experienced dramatic population declines as their preferred habitat disappeared, eventually leading to complete extinction for most of these magnificent creatures within subsequent millennia. This environmental transformation forced human populations to adapt their survival strategies significantly, as traditional large-game hunting became increasingly difficult or impossible throughout many regions previously rich with massive herbivorous prey animals. Sea levels rose substantially as glacial ice melted, flooding previously exposed coastal regions and fundamentally reshaping global coastlines throughout this transformative period. These dramatic environmental changes created both significant challenges and unexpected opportunities for human populations struggling to adapt their established survival strategies to rapidly transforming environmental conditions. Faced with disappearing traditional food sources, human communities throughout various regions would soon begin experimenting with an entirely revolutionary approach to securing reliable sustenance. Humans would soon stop wandering entirely. As Ice Age megafauna disappeared and traditional hunting strategies became increasingly unreliable, human communities throughout various regions began experimenting with revolutionary new approaches to securing reliable food sources. Beginning around 10,000 BC, in the Fertile Crescent region of the Middle East, communities started deliberately cultivating wild grain plants, including wheat and barley, rather than simply gathering whatever grew naturally throughout their territory. This agricultural revolution represented an absolutely transformative shift in human survival strategy, moving from passive resource gathering toward active environmental manipulation designed to increase food production reliability and quantity. Early farmers learned to select seeds from plants demonstrating desirable characteristics, gradually developing domesticated crop varieties significantly different from their wild ancestors through countless generations of selective breeding. Alongside plant cultivation, humans began domesticating animals, including sheep, goats, and eventually cattle, providing reliable sources of meat, milk, and other valuable resources without requiring dangerous, unpredictable hunting expeditions. This transition toward agriculture, while requiring significant additional labor compared to traditional hunting and gathering, offered crucial advantages, including more predictable food supplies and the ability to support significantly larger populations within smaller geographic territories. Agricultural communities began producing food surpluses, enabling population growth while simultaneously freeing some community members from constant food production responsibilities, allowing increasing specialization in other valuable activities. This agricultural revolution fundamentally transformed human society, gradually replacing nomadic hunting and gathering lifestyles that had defined human existence for hundreds of thousands of years, with entirely new patterns of settled agricultural life. Villages supported by reliable agricultural production would soon begin experiencing remarkable growth, eventually developing into something far more complex and ambitious than anyone could have previously imagined. As agricultural techniques improved and food production became increasingly reliable, human communities began establishing permanent settlements, fundamentally different from the temporary camps that had characterized human habitation for hundreds of thousands of years. These early villages, emerging throughout the Fertile Crescent and gradually spreading to other suitable regions, represented humanity's first sustained experiment with permanent residential life. Permanent settlement created entirely new challenges that nomadic hunter-gatherer communities had never previously encountered. Waste management became significantly more complicated, as communities could no longer simply move away from accumulated refuse. Disease transmission increased substantially within densely populated, permanent settlements, as humans living in close proximity to each other and their domesticated animals created ideal conditions for pathogen transmission between individuals. Resource management required increasingly sophisticated planning, as permanent communities needed reliable strategies for storing surplus food, managing agricultural land, and ensuring sustainable resource use across multiple growing seasons, rather than simply moving toward new resources when local supplies became depleted. Social organization also became increasingly complex, as larger, permanent populations required new systems for resolving disputes, organizing community labor, and managing shared resources, including water sources, agricultural land, and storage facilities. Archaeological evidence from early settlements, including the remarkable site of Jericho in the Middle East, reveals increasingly sophisticated architecture, including stone walls, organized housing, and specialized buildings serving particular community functions. These early villages, despite facing significant new challenges, also created unprecedented opportunities for cultural development, technological innovation, and social complexity, impossible within smaller, mobile hunter-gatherer communities. Civilization itself, in its earliest recognizable form, was rapidly approaching as these settlements continued their remarkable transformation. By approximately 4000 BC, some early villages had grown dramatically, transforming into something genuinely unprecedented in human history. True cities supporting populations and social complexity far exceeding anything previously achieved throughout human evolutionary history. These early urban centers, particularly throughout Mesopotamia in the region between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, demonstrated remarkable organizational sophistication, supporting thousands of residents through increasingly specialized economic activities and complex social structures. Urban life required entirely new approaches to social organization, as cities needed reliable systems for distributing food, water, and other essential resources among populations far too large for traditional kinship-based decision-making processes. Specialized occupations emerged as cities grew increasingly complex, including dedicated farmers, craftsmen, traders, religious leaders, and eventually administrative officials responsible for managing increasingly complicated urban systems. This occupational specialization represented a profound transformation from earlier human societies, where most individuals had performed similar survival-focused activities, toward increasingly complex societies where individuals could dedicate themselves entirely to specific specialized roles, benefiting the broader community. Religious institutions became increasingly important within these early urban centers, with elaborate temples serving as focal points for community identity, resource redistribution, and social organization. Trade networks expanded significantly as cities required resources unavailable within their immediate surroundings, encouraging exchange relationships, connecting distant communities throughout the broader region. These early cities, while still relatively small compared to later historical urban centers, represented something genuinely revolutionary, the birth of civilization itself, fundamentally transforming how humans organize their societies, economies, and daily lives. History, in its truest recorded sense, was about to begin as these civilizations continued their remarkable development. As early cities continued developing throughout Mesopotamia and other regions, human societies experienced accelerating innovation across multiple dimensions simultaneously, fundamentally transforming virtually every aspect of daily life within just a few thousand years. Trade networks expanded dramatically, connecting distant communities through exchange relationships involving increasingly diverse goods, including metals, textiles, agricultural products, and eventually luxury items, demonstrating social status and wealth. This expanding trade encouraged increasing economic specialization, as communities began focusing production efforts toward goods they could produce particularly efficiently, then trading surplus production for items more efficiently produced elsewhere. Social complexity increased correspondingly, as growing wealth differences and specialized occupational roles created increasingly distinct social classes within urban populations. Some individuals accumulated significant wealth and influence through successful trading activities, religious leadership, or administrative authority, while others occupied more modest social positions focused on agricultural labor or basic craft production. This growing social stratification, while creating certain inequalities, also enabled increasingly sophisticated cultural and technological development, as wealthy individuals and institutions could support specialized artisans, religious scholars, and eventually administrative systems requiring significant resource investment. Metalworking technology advanced significantly during this period, with copper and eventually bronze tools and weapons gradually replacing traditional stone implements throughout increasingly sophisticated urban societies. Religious and political authority increasingly merged within emerging leadership structures as powerful individuals claimed divine sanction or special spiritual authority, justifying their growing social and economic influence. These accelerating transformations throughout economic, social, and technological dimensions were rapidly establishing foundational patterns that would soon enable the emergence of humanity's first true kingdoms and organized political states. As social complexity continued accelerating throughout early urban centers, increasingly organized political structures began emerging, representing crucial precursors to humanity's first true kingdoms and eventually larger empires. Local leaders, who had previously derived authority primarily through religious significance or accumulated personal wealth, increasingly developed more formalized political institutions, including early forms of organized governance, basic legal frameworks, and eventually hereditary leadership positions passed between generations within ruling families. These emerging political structures required increasingly sophisticated administrative systems, including methods for collecting taxes or tribute, organizing collective labor projects, and maintaining basic social order across growing populations. Written record-keeping, which would soon develop into formal writing systems, began emerging from practical needs to track agricultural production, trade transactions, and administrative obligations within increasingly complex urban societies. Military organization also developed during this period, as growing cities required organized defense systems protecting accumulated wealth and resources from external threats, while also potentially enabling aggressive expansion into neighboring territories. This combination of religious authority, economic control, administrative sophistication, and military capability created increasingly powerful political entities capable of exercising authority over substantial populations and territories far exceeding what earlier tribal or village-based societies had previously achieved. These developing political structures represented humanity's transition from purely survival-focused cooperation toward genuinely organized civilization, complete with formal leadership structures, administrative systems, and eventually written historical records documenting human achievements and events. The age of recorded history, complete with named rulers, documented events, and preserved written accounts, was now approaching rapidly, fundamentally transforming how future generations would understand and study human historical development. Looking back across this extraordinary evolutionary journey, spanning literally millions of years from humanity's earliest ancestors to the emergence of organized civilization, certain fundamental patterns become remarkably clear. Every significant human achievement, from massive cities to sophisticated technology to complex social organizations, ultimately traces its origins back to those initial evolutionary breakthroughs achieved by our earliest ancestors. The capacity for upright walking, which freed early hominin hands for tool use, established foundational physical capabilities, enabling subsequent technological development. Early stone tools demonstrated humanity's growing capacity to shape environmental conditions rather than simply reacting to them, establishing patterns of innovation that would eventually produce increasingly sophisticated technology throughout subsequent millennia. Fire mastery provided crucial nutritional and protective advantages while simultaneously creating social spaces that likely strengthened community bonds and facilitated cultural transmission between generations. Language development enabled increasingly sophisticated cooperation and knowledge transmission, establishing communication capabilities that remain absolutely fundamental to virtually every human achievement throughout subsequent history. Even today, modern humans retain countless physical and psychological characteristics directly inherited from these ancient evolutionary pressures, including our social cooperative instincts, our remarkable capacity for tool use and technological innovation, and our fundamental drive toward exploration and environmental adaptation. Understanding this deep evolutionary history provides crucial perspective regarding humanity's place within the broader natural world, revealing how thoroughly our species remains connected to ancient evolutionary processes despite our seemingly dramatic technological and cultural advancement. This remarkable evolutionary journey, while reaching a significant milestone through the emergence of organized civilization, certainly does not represent any kind of conclusion. Our journey, in countless meaningful ways, continues unfolding even now. Before the pyramids rose from Egyptian sands, before Rome built its roads and legions, before anyone learned to write down a single word of human history, there were only small groups of people walking together across dangerous landscapes, searching desperately for food, shelter, and perhaps something even more valuable, hope for a better future. Against odds that seem almost impossible from our modern perspective, these early humans survived. They survived predators far stronger than themselves. They survived ice ages that transformed entire continents. They survived migrations into completely unknown territories filled with unfamiliar dangers. Every single step they took, every tool they shaped, every fire they learned to control, every word they spoke, and every painting they created, deep within hidden caves, became part of an enormous foundation supporting everything humanity would eventually achieve. The cities we live in today, the languages we speak, the technologies we depend upon, and the cultures we celebrate all trace their ultimate origins back to those first courageous humans who refused to simply accept extinction as their inevitable fate. This remarkable story extends far beyond simple scientific facts about fossils, genetics, and archaeological discoveries. It represents something profoundly more meaningful, the extraordinary journey of a single species that learned, against tremendous odds, to adapt, to create, to cooperate, and ultimately to reshape the entire planet according to its own remarkable vision. This is not merely the story of human evolution as documented through scientific research. This is, in the most genuine and meaningful sense possible, the story of us.